Hi, this is Cynthia Douthit again with the Jewish Christian Studies Center. And as I often say, we need to cross the bridge back into the time and culture in which the Bible was written. It helps us to understand when we look through the culture, the content, and the context of what is going on. And so today I want to bring to you a little bit in the New Testament. Oftentimes we read it, and we read it through the Western mindset. So as we look at Acts 20, I think maybe you'll get a little bit of an understanding as to what was really going on. As we look at Acts 27, it says on Motzei Shabbat, when we were gathered to break bread, Shaul, which is Paul, addressed the group. Now, one of the things I want to say right off the bat is the verb that is used for Paul addressing the people is the verb that is used when he is addressing the Jewish people. We know one thing that Jews...
What?
I'm doing a teaching. I'm live.
Oh, okay.
Okay, my husband just walked in. He's been out in the hayfields. Okay, so we'll start this over for a few minutes and then...
Hello, everybody.
All right, Harold said hello. Next thing will be Zippy the dog, short for Zipporah. Okay, so here we are back to Acts 20, verse 7. And we're looking at Shaul, and this is Paul. One of the things we know about Paul is he stayed a Jew. He didn't become what we think of as a Christian. He stayed a Pharisee, and he was very quick to tell people that he was a Pharisee. He was a Jew's Jew. He knew what tribe he was from. He's from the tribe of Benjamin. That he spoke Hebrew, that was his first language. So we see that Paul is addressing a group of Jewish people here. Now the next thing to look at is Shaul Paul. Shaul is his Hebrew name. Paul is the Greek name. And it's still common today to find Jewish people that have what we refer to as their synagogue, their Hebrew name, the one that they were named on that 8th day and that they used at their bar mitzvah or bat mitzvah. But then we also see many of them have a name that is maybe what we think of as a Gentile modern name. So they will have different names. So it was not unusual for Paul to have Shaul become Paul. Many times people think that with the name change that he quit being a Jew, but he did not. This was something normal for that time period to have your Greek name for working in the world, so to speak, and then your Hebrew name when you were dealing in the synagogue and places like this. So we see on Motzei Shabbat, when we were gathered to break bread, Shaul addressed them. And this was a group of Jews. They believed in Yeshua, Jesus as Messiah. But there's an interesting thing here. In the King James, it might say on the first day of the week, as was their custom, they met. And so you have to ask yourself, what's their custom? Who are these people? Well, this is a custom of the Jewish people. And in Israel today, they still do this. They will be closed for Shabbat. And oftentimes they will stay closed for a couple of 3 hours after the sun has gone down. And then the stores will open and people will go down to the local cafe and they'll have, some coffee and they'll talk about what they did on the Sabbath. So what we see here in the King James where it says on the first day of the week, yes, that is a reference to Sunday. But we need to look and see what was going on Motzei Shabbat. And that is the Sabbath is ending. Again, it is a Jewish cultural thing. It's a Jewish people thing. And when we're reading the Bible, we need to go back and look at the content and the culture in which it was written. So on the first day of the week, as was their custom, was really what we think of as Saturday night sundown. The Sabbath has ended and they are meeting together as a group. Now, when you go over and look in 1 Corinthians 16, it gives us a little more insight into it. It says, now in regards to the collection being made for God's people, you are to do the same as I directed the congregation every week on Motzei Shabbat. So one of the things we see within Judaism is they don't carry money on the Sabbath. And so this Motzei Shabbat, this celebration of the ending of the Sabbath, and they have a Havdalah service, and maybe we'll do a teaching on that. Sometimes we do that over the fellowship. But the idea was you didn't carry your money on the Sabbath when you met in the synagogue. And so you would bring your money. Paul is saying, Shaul is bring your money at the Motzei Shabbat service, at the Havdalah service. The sun has gone down, so now you can carry your money and give it to us to take on our tour. So when we look at 1 Corinthians 16:2, it gives us a little insight as to Acts 20. So on Motzei Shabbat, on the first day of the week, meaning after the sun has set, as the Sabbath has ended, the people would gather together for this special time of reflecting on the Sabbath and having a Havdalah service. They're really sad that the Sabbath is over because now they're going to have to go back to work. So I hope this gives you a little insight when we cross this bridge back into the time and culture and understand. So here we see that Paul, Shaul, is addressing this group of people since he was going to leave the next day. So he was needing their funds, their tithes, their offerings, so to speak, that he was going to take and help with other congregations. So we see that he was going to leave the next day. But just like a preacher, he gets an audience, and he keeps talking until midnight. And there were many of them there. They had oil lamps. They were in the upstairs room where they were meeting, and there was a young fellow, Eutychus, and he was sitting on the windowsill. And as Paul's drosh, his discourse was going on and on and on, and we know I'm guilty of how we can do that sometimes. And Paul just kept going on and on. And finally, this boy went into such a deep sleep that he grew sleepier and sleepier. He fell sound asleep, and he fell from the third-story window to the ground. And when they picked him up, he was dead. And then it says, but Paul went down. I can just see him just, running down these steps. And he got down there, and here's this boy that has fallen out the window because he's been talking too long. And he threw himself on him. He put his arms around him. It's that idea, oh my goodness, what has happened? This boy has fallen out of the window. But then Paul could feel, that life was in him. And he says, don't be upset. He's alive. And I love this part, because then Paul goes back upstairs. He broke the bread and he ate, and he continued talking with them until daylight. And then he left. And then the verse says, so greatly relieved, they brought the boy home alive. I think when you read this story, you need to read it with a bit of humor. Paul is talking a long time, and sometimes we preachers can get on a topic and keep going and going and going. And with that said, I see I've done 6-7 minutes, so I don't want to go too long. But we see that Paul just, oh yeah, he's alive. And he goes right back upstairs, continues the breaking of the bread, the eating, and continues talking, and he stays there till daylight. The boy's alive. The people are greatly relieved. They take their boy home, and all is well, and Paul goes off on his journey. So I hope that you've enjoyed a little bit of this, of learning what the Motzei Shabbat is. It's the ending of the Sabbath. It's a time when they reflect at a Havdalah service and reflecting of how the Sabbath was a time of rest with the Lord, rest in Adonai, and with the family and study. And now at the Motzei Shabbat, at the end of the Sabbath, the Havdalah service, it's the separation of the holy day, the day that is set apart. And again, the word holy, kadosh, it doesn't mean perfect. It means separate or separated. So God says, I am holy, you are to be holy. I am separate, you're to be separated. So we see the Sabbath is a separated day. And so by this, at the Havdalah service, at the Motzei Shabbat, at the ending of the Sabbath, they are acknowledging that this separated day that we see all the way back in Genesis is over. And now it's time to go back to work, to the regular work week. Hope you've enjoyed this. Again, I'm Cynthia Douthit with the Jewish Christian Studies Center. Shalom, shalom.